13 years, 13 long, agonizing years I spent as a wraith, a whisper lost in the wind, waiting for the moment I could once again lay claim to the world that was rightfully mine. I watched, powerless, as my empire crumbled, my followers scattered like frightened rats. Some were imprisoned, others hid, cowards who pleaded ignorance, who denounced my name. And yet the world moved on, believing me gone, a failed tyrant lost to time. How foolish, how utterly blind. But time favors those with patience, and I am nothing if not patient. My exile was not the end. It was an interlude, a moment of suffering that would make my return all the more devastating. While the wizarding world bathed in its fragile peace, I prepared. I endured the torment of non-existence, clinging to the remnants of my shattered soul, waiting for the right moment. And now, at last, that moment has come. The rat returns, Peter Pettigrew, a wretched, sniveling excuse for a wizard, but useful in his own pitiful way. When he stumbled into my sanctuary in the Albanian forest, shaking and weak, he did not come out of loyalty. No, he came because he had nowhere else to run. Betrayal breeds exile, and when Sirius Black escaped Azkaban, the rat was left exposed, hunted. He sought refuge with the master he had abandoned. I might have killed him. His treachery warranted it. My anger burned at the thought of his betrayal, the cowardice that had driven him into hiding rather than seeking to restore my power. But I had greater plans, and his fear made him pliable. Wormtail, for all his cowardice, was cunning when desperate, and desperation makes men do extraordinary things. He told me of an old ally, Bertha Jorkins, a foolish ministry worker who had wandered too far. Wormtail had subdued her, bringing her to me like a dog retrieving a broken bird. And broken she was. The things I learned from her mind, secrets buried deep hidden affairs of the ministry, whispers of Barty Crouch and his treacherous son. But one revelation eclipsed them all. The Triwizard Tournament was to be held at Hogwarts, and with it came an opportunity. The tortured mind. Extracting information from her was entertaining. She whimpered and sobbed, her feeble occlumency shattering under my touch like a brittle shell. Her mind was an open book, every memory mine to leaf through at will. I let her relive her past mistakes, her betrayals, her indiscretions. The fear alone was enough to strip her mind bare. When she had nothing left to give, I silenced her, permanently. Returned to Little Hangleton. With knowledge came action. We fled Albania, slithering back into the folds of the world like shadows in the night. We sought refuge in the decaying remains of my father's home, Little Hangleton, the village that bore the bloodline I despised. And there, in the Riddle House, we prepared. It was a wretched place, stained with the memory of my greatest act, where I had cleansed my bloodline, removing the weak, pitiful roots that had tethered me to mortality. My father had been nothing, a simpleton muggle unworthy of the magic that ran through my veins. Killing him had been a mercy, and now, in the ruins of his existence, I would forge my rebirth. Wormtail obeyed without question. He had seen what happened to those who failed me. Night after night he gathered the necessary elements, whispering incantations in the dark. It was slow, agonizing work. My spirit longed for flesh, my power stretched thin, but I would not rush. This resurrection had to be perfect. The plan unfolds. And so I set my plan in motion. Barty Crouch Jr., a faithful servant hidden in the bowels of the ministry, unnoticed, discarded like refuse, was my key. A master of disguise, his devotion had not waned. Polyjuice potion, deception, a stolen life, all pieces in my grand design. He would enter my enemy into the tournament. He would ensure that when the time was right, the boy would be delivered to me. It was poetic, in a way. Hogwarts, the place that had once housed my ambitions, would now become my hunting ground. The Triwizard Cup, a symbol of unity and competition, would serve as a gateway, a portkey to my domain. No one would suspect, no one would question, and Potter, the arrogant child who had twice escaped my grasp, would walk willingly to his execution. The ritual begins. The moment arrived. The graveyard in Little Hangleton was silent, the night thick with anticipation. The portkey activated, and in a flash of blue light he was there. Harry Potter, dazed, confused, his wand trembling in his hand. I watched as he took in his surroundings, his eyes widening at the sight of my father's grave, the cold realization sinking into his bones. Wormtail did not hesitate. He struck, binding the boy, silencing his protests. This was it. The ritual I had waited for, the moment my patience would be rewarded. Bone of the father, unwillingly given. The earth trembled as the grave split open, consuming the past to fuel the future. Flesh of the servant, willingly given. I watched as Wormtail screamed, his hand severed, blood staining the ground. He was pathetic. Blood of the enemy, forcibly taken. Ah, Potter's fear, his confusion. I reveled in it. The cut was precise, the blood dripping into the cauldron like liquid fire. And then silence, a stillness before the storm. The air thickened, magic crackling in the night. The cauldron roared, consuming the ingredients, weaving them into something more. And then I felt it, the pull, the force, the rush of power flooding through me. My body, once dust and whispers, reformed, solidified. I stepped forward, flesh and bone once more. First steps in flesh. As I stepped from the cauldron, reborn, I exhaled slowly, relishing the sensation of air filling my lungs. How long had it been since I had last drawn breath? Since I had last felt? My skin, pale as bone, prickled with raw energy, the very essence of dark magic surging through my veins. My fingers flexed, curling, stretching, testing their newfound strength. I turned my attention to Wormtail, still kneeling, his stump of a hand bleeding onto the damp grass. He whimpered pitifully, awaiting either mercy or wrath. The smell of singed flesh and acrid potion residue filled the air. Wormtail's sacrifice had served its purpose, and though he disgusted me, I granted him a moment's reprieve. "Your hand," I whispered, my voice smooth yet edged with malice. "You have given much for me, Wormtail." With a flick of my wand, a new hand formed, gleaming silver, strong, lethal. He gasped, flexing his fingers in awe, but his gratitude was meaningless. He was nothing but a pawn, and he knew it. The Death Eaters arrived moments later, summoned by the dark mark that blazed in the sky. They appeared in clusters, creeping from the darkness, their black robes billowing as they formed a circle around me. Some hesitated, eyes flickering with guilt and fear. Others knelt immediately, recognizing the power that had returned. "You dare hesitate!" My voice cut through the night like a blade, laced with fury and command. "You abandoned me. You believed me gone, cowering in your comfortable lives, while I lingered in suffering." A few trembled, their masked faces turned downward in submission. Lucius Malfoy was among them, his aristocratic composure faltering ever so slightly. Even Bellatrix, my most fanatical servant, knelt lower than usual, as if to atone for time lost. I let the silence stretch, let the weight of my presence crush them. Fear was my greatest weapon. They had forgotten it, forgotten me. But tonight they remembered, the duel that should have ended it. And yet, even in my moment of victory, Potter remained. He had watched in horror, his young mind barely comprehending the forces at play. I saw the way he gritted his teeth, the way his fingers tightened around his wand. The defiance in his green eyes was insufferable. A lesser wizard would have killed him outright. But I wanted more. I wanted to see the realization dawn in his face, the understanding that he had lost. I untied him, tossing his wand at his feet. "Pick it up," I commanded. He hesitated, his body rigid with fear, but he obeyed. "A duel," I said, the smirk in my voice unmistakable. "Let us see what the great Harry Potter is made of." He lifted his wand, shaking slightly, but he did not run. Foolish boy. So like his father. The first curse I sent his way was lazy, almost dismissive. He dodged, surprising me. His instincts had sharpened since last we met. The second curse, more precise, forced him onto the defensive, his wand flashing with desperate counterspells. I pressed forward. His movements were clumsy, his breath coming in quick, panicked bursts. This was not a battle. It was an execution drawn out for my amusement. And then it happened. The wands connected. Twin cores, refusing to act against one another, their magic entwining in a deadly dance of light and force. The power crackled in the air between us, twisting reality itself. And from that terrible, impossible connection, shadows of the dead emerged. His parents, that foolish Diggory boy, even the wretched Bertha Jorkins. Their ghostly figures flickered, whispering, shielding him. Stealing my victory. Potter's fear turned to something else, determination. The spirits lunged, holding me at bay for the briefest of moments. And then Potter ran. He seized the port key and vanished. Fury and future plans. For a moment, silence reigned. And then the rage struck. I roared, my magic lashing out, the gravestones cracking under my fury. My Death Eaters flinched, cowering. I could still feel him, his presence burned into my senses, but he was gone. Gone. He had survived. Again. I forced my breath to slow. This was not over. No, this was only the beginning. He had returned to Hogwarts with the truth, but truth could be twisted. The Ministry would not believe him. Not yet. Fudge was a fool, a coward clinging to his illusion of order. I would exploit that weakness. Dumbledore, however, was another matter. He would not doubt. He would prepare. I turned to my followers, my voice ice-cold. We proceed as planned. The wizarding world may not yet tremble in fear, but soon they will. We strike where they are weakest. We corrupt. We divide. We conquer. The Dark Lord had returned, and there would be no salvation this time. Manipulating the Ministry. Let Potter speak his tale of horror. Let Dumbledore warn them all. It would not matter. Cornelius Fudge, that bumbling politician, would never accept the truth. He feared Dumbledore more than me, feared the loss of his own fragile authority. That was the weakness I would exploit. My Death Eaters would infiltrate the ranks of influence, whispering carefully constructed lies. The old fools at the Ministry wanted to believe the Dark Lord was a myth of the past. Fear made men blind, and I would keep them blind until it was too late. The world will be ours again, I declared to my followers, not through brute force alone, but through the corruption of those who think themselves untouchable. Lucius Malfoy bowed low, his mask glinting in the dim light. The minister already listens to me, my lord. If we move subtly, he will dismiss Potter's words as delusions. I smiled, a cruel, knowing thing. Then ensure that he does, punishing the cowards. But before we could march forward, there was unfinished business. My eyes swept across the circle of Death Eaters, stopping on those who had failed me, those who had denied me in my absence. Avery trembled beneath my gaze. My lord, Crucio. His screams filled the night, a wretched symphony of pain and regret. I let it continue for a long, lingering moment before releasing him, watching as he gasped and shuddered in the dirt. "You chose comfort over loyalty," I whispered, "but I am merciful to those who seek redemption." He sobbed his gratitude, his body shaking. How easily the strong became weak when faced with true power. The weight of destiny. As my followers fell back into silent reverence, I turned my thoughts inward. This was only the beginning. Harry Potter's survival had, once again, shifted fate in a way I had not foreseen, but fate was not immutable. It could be shaped, bent. I had returned, stronger than before, and now the war would begin anew. The wizarding world would soon know despair unlike anything they had ever faced. I looked down at my own pale fingers, flexing them, feeling the raw strength of my reborn form. Power, true power, was no longer a whisper, but a storm ready to be unleashed. The time for hiding had ended. The time for vengeance had begun. The final command. I raised my wand, my voice steady, unwavering. The dark mark will rise across Britain once more. There will be no sanctuary, no safety. We will strike when they least expect it. The Death Eaters bowed. The storm had begun. This was the Antagonist Diaries. And remember, every villain has a story.